History of U.S., Chapter 35, Volume D, Separate but Unequal. Back near the end of the 19th century, Homer Plessy was arrested for sitting in a whites-only railroad car. Was it legal for the railroads to separate the races? What does the Constitution say? The 14th Amendment says that no state shall abridge the privileges of citizens of the United States, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Abridge the privileges. This means take away or limit the citizens. Equal rights of the laws. That seems clear. Does keeping people separate on a train abridge privileges? Does it deny anyone equal protection of the laws? Matthew, A History of U.S. by Joy Hakim, Chapter 35, Separate but Unequal. Back near the end of the 19th century, Homer Plessy was arrested for sitting in a whites-only railroad car. Was it legal for the railroads to separate the races? What does the Constitution say? The 14th Amendment says that no state shall abridge the privileges of citizens of the United States, nor deny to any person within the jurisdiction its equal protection of the laws. Abridge the privileges. That means to take away or limit the rights of citizens. Equal protection of the laws. That seems clear. Does keeping people separate on a train abridge privileges? Does it deny anyone equal protection of the law? Some Americans weren't sure about that, and they looked to the Supreme Court for guidance. Finally, in 1896, the Supreme Court gave them an answer, when it decided Homer Plessy's case. This picture down here is a bus station in the South, like this one, in Durham, North Carolina, had separate waiting rooms for white people and African Americans. It was an answer that would cause a lot of people a lot of grief. Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote the decision for the majority of the justices. He said that the 14th Amendment called for the absolute equality of the two races before the law, but it could not have been intended to abolish distinctions based upon color, or to enforce social equality, or a commingling of the two races. Do you understand that? The races were equal before the law, but laws could prevent them from mingling. Justice John Marshall Harlan disagreed with the majority decision. Supreme Court justices often disagree with each other. The majority rules, but those who don't agree can write their dissenting opinions. In the famous 1896 decision, Justice Harlan wrote, "In view of the Constitution, in the eye of the law, there is no superior, dominant, ruling class of citizens. Our Constitution is colorblind, and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens." But the majority opinion was the one that counted. The Supreme Court said that if facilities were equal, they could be separate. The Plessy versus Ferguson decision made segregation legal in schools, restaurants, hotels, and other public places in the southern states. Jim Crow had won the approval of the highest court. Separate but equal was the law. Charlie Houston and his students. Charles Hamilton Houston thought the Supreme Court's Plessy decision was a mistake. Houston had graduated from Amherst College in 1915, served as an officer in World War I, received his law degree from Harvard, and then earned a Ph.D. Even with all those degrees, Charlie Houston knew he had no chance of getting a job with a big law firm, simply because of the color of his skin. But Houston studied law because he wanted to help his people. He wanted to use the power of the courts to end Jim Crow. He became an expert in the law of the Constitution, and then, at Howard University's law school, he trained other black lawyers to be experts too. One of Charlie Houston's best students, Thurgood Marshall, said that Houston made it clear to all of us that when we were done here, we were expected to go out and do something with our lives. As you'll soon see, Marshall did something with his life. Something very important. Decades after the Plessy decision, a number of court cases challenged the idea of separate but equal. Here are the stories behind those cases. Linda Carroll Brown, who was 7 years old and lived at Topeka, Kansas, had to walk across railroad tracks and take an old bus to get to school, though there was a better school 5 blocks from her house. Linda couldn't go to that school because she was African American and the schools in Topeka were segregated. Linda's father, the Reverend Oliver Brown, didn't think that was right. He went to court to try and do something about it. Their case became known as Brown versus the Board of Education. South Carolina's Clarendon County spent $43 a year on each of its black students. However, it spent $179 a year on each white student. The white children all had school desks. In 2 of the black schools, there were no desks at all. Harry and Lisa Briggs and 20 other parents sued the Clarendon County School Board. They wanted equal funding for the black students. They sued in the name of 10-year-old Harry Briggs, Jr., and 66 other children. Right away, Lisa Briggs was fired from her job. So were most of the other adults who signed the lawsuit that was titled Briggs versus Clarendon County. Barbara Rose Johns, a junior at Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia, was angry about conditions in her school. It had been built for 200 students, but it held 450. There was no cafeteria, no gym. The highest paid teachers at Moton School received less than the lowest paid teachers at Farmville's white schools. A committee of black parents had petitioned the county for a new school and had been turned down. Johns decided to act. She had a friend telephone the school principals and tell him what was needed at the bus terminal. Tell him he was needed at the bus terminal at once. Then she called a meeting of all the students. She told the teachers they were planning a surprise event. In this picture, Linda Brown is shown sitting at the front of her classroom in the segregated Monroe School in Kansas and became the focal point of the landmark Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. Linda and her younger sister walked along railroad tracks on the way to board a bus to school, although there was a better-funded public school closer to their home. She was right. They were surprised. Barbara Johns talked the students at Moton into going on a strike for a better school. They walked out of their classes. A member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, came to Farmville. He intended to tell the students that Farmville was not the place to fight segregation. But he was so impressed by their determination that he helped 117 Moton High School students sue the state of Virginia. They demanded that the state abolish segregated schools. Their case was called Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County, because the first of the students listed was a 14-year-old Dorothy E. Davis. Each of those three cases was defeated in court, but that didn't stop the plaintiffs, those who were suing. They appealed the cases. This painting up here depicts the Supreme Court justices who presided over the historic case of Brown versus Board of Education. Racism wasn't and isn't just a problem of blacks in the South. It is a human problem, and it is found across the land and across the world, too. Racism is the irrational hatred of those who are different from you. Almost every minority group has, at one time or another, suffered the pain of irrational hatred. What does it mean to appeal a law case? Our legal system begins with city and county courts, goes on to state courts, and then to federal courts. And finally, it goes to the Supreme Court. Suppose you can go to court and you don't think your trial was fair. You can appeal your case to a higher court. The higher court may reverse the lower court's decision. If it doesn't, you may, in some case, appeal the case still further and further until you finally get the Supreme Court. And that's exactly what those plaintiffs did. They appealed them all the way to the United States Supreme Court. They were grouped with two other cases dealing with school segregation, one from Delaware and one from Washington, D.C. Together, the 5 suits were called by the name of the first of them, Brown versus Board of Education. That case would directly affect all the schools in the 21 states with segregated schools. It would indirectly affect almost every school in the United States. Brown versus Board of Education was to become one of the most important cases ever brought before the Supreme Court. Supreme Court cases are not handled like cases you see on television. The people involved, the school children in this case, don't come before the court. There are no witnesses. Lawyers do all the talking. They often spend months or even years preparing their cases. Then they present their argument to the 9 justices. The Supreme Court justices usually ask questions. Sometimes those questions can be answered at once. Sometimes the lawyers have to come back and re-argue that case. Anyone can attend a Supreme Court session if he or she is willing to stand in line. The court in Washington, D.C., right near the U.S. Capitol, which is where Congress meets. On December 9th, 1952, all the seats were filled in the Supreme Court chamber, and 400 people were turned away. That is unusual, but this was an unusual day. The court was ready to consider Brown versus Board of Education. The NAACP was representing the children. Charlie Houston was dead, but his star pupil, Thurgood Marshall, the great-grandson of a slave, argued their case. Marshall, a hard worker, was a meticulous lawyer with a good sense of humor. He had argued 15 cases before the Supreme Court and won 13. The lawyer Marshall faced was John W. Davis. Some people said that Davis was the best lawyer in America. He had argued more cases before the Supreme Court than any living attorney. Davis had run for president against Calvin Coolidge, and everyone seemed to like him. And then over here is a picture. Like an eating cancer, said Thurgood Marshall. Segregation destroys the morale of our citizens and disfigures our country throughout the world. Though he lost the election. Even Thurgood Marshall liked Davis. They often ate lunch together. Supreme Court justices do not decide questions of right and wrong. They can sometimes be a matter of simply opinion. We live in a society based on law. The Constitution is our highest law. The job of the justices is to decide the meaning of the Constitution. Does the Constitution permit segregation, or does segregation break the rules laid out in the Constitution? That was the question the justices had to decide. Marshall and the NAACP lawyers presented 2 arguments. First, they argued that the 14th Amendment, which says no state shall abridge the privileges of citizens of the United States, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, made the doctrine of separate but equal unconstitutional. Then they argued that segregated schools can never truly be equal. Separating people of itself makes them feel unequal and inferior. The Plessy case was wrong, they said. John Davis looked at the 14th Amendment and the rest of the Constitution. He said that nothing in it prevented separation as long as equal facilities were provided. Each state, said Davis, has the right to make its own decisions on social matters such as segregation. He believed that the Plessy case was right. This was a very difficult case. The justices asked questions. They took their time. A year passed. It looked as if the court might be split, with some justices saying segregated schools were unconstitutional, and some saying they were not. The issue was dividing the country. If the court were to split, it would make those divisions worse. Then something unexpected happened. The Supreme Court's Chief Justice died. President Dwight Eisenhower named California's former governor...